You ready for the close-up?
Yeah.
Mr. Mel?
So more nervous now than all work. We'll just run through a few details, notes and things, but the idea is obviously very much about practical and demonstration. So while we're going along, if things pop into your head or questions, or if I'm not explaining what I'm doing, you think, why are you doing that? Please kind of pitch in. It's the whole idea of it being practical, is you can actually hopefully pick something up and learn something from it. Health and safety is obviously important in the shack or whatever. Quite a few times I've come down in the morning and found out I've not turned the soldering iron off, it's been on all night. Not a good thing to do. I think probably like most cables, this one's probably got a bit of a piece out of it where it's been in contact with a hot iron. Fumes, chemicals, use isopropyl alcohol for flux removal and cleaning up. There's Josh Williams, it's an old bottle that I'd just buy fresh and top it up. Fluxes, there's a liquid flux. That's the same as used in the flux in the core solder, but liquid form, and very one of my favourites really. Similar thing, that's a flux pen. You can literally just press the end down and bleed as much out or as little. And that's supposed to be a non-residue one, so you're supposed to be able to get away without cleaning afterwards. I still recommend you clean afterwards. So obviously if you're soldering all the time, you need fume extraction. The stuff we use at work, we have an extractor and a carbon filter, so it's not ditching it into the atmosphere to your colleagues. Hopefully we're not generating quite so much in the way of fumes and things. It's going to be a hazard to anyone, but I found in the past if you've got like flu or cold, it does make it quite a lot worse. So if you're feeling really rough, you don't want to be spending an evening soldering. Electrostatics, looking primarily at soldering, but if you're looking at soldering the electrostatic devices, you can get away using an ordinary iron. This one here I think has actually got an earth termination, so you can unearth the iron. You don't have to have fancy, expensive mats and things. You can get away with a sheet of baker foil. The only thing that's recommended is you use a 1 meg resistor to earth, and similar with your iron. Twofold, if you get something that's live, you're not going to get a lethal current that's going to kill you. And also, if there's any difference in voltage, it doesn't matter what the voltages are, as long as they balance out, if you're working with static sensitive equipment. But you want it to discharge slowly. You don't want it to suddenly put a spark across and destroy the nice integrated circuit you spent a lot of money on. Soldering irons, one of the things I suppose is quite new for me in the last year or two, since we do this kind of intensive soldering training, is when you finish soldering you clean the tip. That actually now is not recommended, because anything that's bare and exposed, what does it do?
Oxidises.
It oxidises. So when you finished your work, you're best actually, shakes, tinning the tip and then turning your iron off. So when you finish work, clean it, tin it, and turn it off. So that's something I've made a practice as a habit doing that now. The main thing with soldering and getting decent joints is cleaning things. And I fell foul in when we did the surface mount training. The printed circuit boards we had prepared, all brand new, the components never been used, and you're looking at very small things with like 120 connections around it. We use microscopes for that level of work, but I hadn't really bothered to check it under the microscope first, so I started to fit this device, and would it solder? It would not. And I had 3 attempts at cleaning the solder off, so I couldn't remove the device. It's very fine leaded. So using various brushes and isopropyl alcohol, cleaning it, and I say the leads are so fine that would destroy the leads. So you're having to brush with the direction of the leads, solder it, desolder it, solder it, and about 3 or 4 attempts before I got anything that was passable. And it was so poor in the end. There's a space on the board to do another example. So I got another chip, made sure it was clean, and then worked with that. So what I'm saying is lots of things that look fine, they look clean, but they're not.
Can I just say something?
Yes.
I notice your solder, it looks absolutely fantastic. Mine, the reel I've got, has been going for about 15 years, and I always clean it up.
Yeah. just,
You were probably going to say that.
yeah. So you see there, even though this looks quite nice and shiny, it's not a bad thing to run it through, and it'll do that as many times as you do it because it's lead based. You'll never get it so it's clean, but what you will find is it's
surface.
it takes any surface oxidisation
I
off.
thought of that.
And if it's stuff you've had lying around for a while, then it's worth doing that. The other thing really with solders, this is again flux cord resin solder, but hopefully as you see there, it's about a third the thickness. And some of the stuff we use at work is not much thicker than a hair, because if you're soldering very small things, you put that in there, you're covering 4 leads with it, you just get a huge weight roll. So it's the right thing for the right job. If you're soldering aerial connectors and big hefty leads, you don't want to be wasting yards of that to fill a joint. You use a heavier solder. So it's horses for courses. The flux that's in the solder will actually aid the soldering of the joint. And here I've got a piece of double-sided copper-clad board that may not look particularly bad, but it's just going to stick some solder in it, and as I say, the flux is supposed to clean it, but we'll see if that surprised me actually, yeah. That's actually gone on quite well, so that's without actually any preparation at all. This is something that I kind of recommend really, that's actually a fiberglass. So it's actually loads and loads of strands. If you get a torch, it's like fibre optics, you can shine a light through it. But that's a good thing for actually removing surface oxidisation, and that's something I use a lot. So you'll see the difference once you've actually removed the surface oxide. You see. So, but I was surprised at lots of things. I was doing some soldering the other day on something that was old, and one thing you find with that is the flux will work for a certain amount of time, and that's what's smoking is the flux. So the flux is disappearing, and what you find then is you start to spread it on, you've got no flux, so it's not actually sticking to the copper. You've run out of flux, it's not going to actually do its job. So one of the things that brings to mind is if you're soldering, you've got a finite time before you burn your flux off, and the joint's going to start to be a poor joint. I think one of the big mistakes I see people making is with they solder a joint and they keep on going in with the iron so that they'll solder it, and then they'll sort of fiddle again and they'll keep fiddling trying to get the joint right. All the time you're burning your flux off, and in the end you end up with a degraded joint. So one of the other things to bear in mind is a mechanical joint as well as a solder joint. The solder joint will give you the electrical connection that you want, but we also want a mechanical joint. What I mean by that is, you can solder that on, but again, if I was soldering that on, I would want to tin it first, to your idea. I don't drink, honestly. Stick that on there. So that's actually soldered on there, but obviously the strength of that, it's not going to give you a good joint. So common sense says if you're doing that, you'd want to actually increase the surface area of contact. So as soon as you've bent a leg on it, you're going to have a job to actually remove that. When you're actually fitting components, I don't know if you use pre-formed tools or anything to actually bend resistors or capacitors into shape.
I've never seen one. Never seen one.
Never seen one. This was, I think that was £6 off of eBay. I built a project recently that I was bending quite a few components, which I normally just do, say with pliers and just freehand bend them. I thought I wanted to actually get them reasonably uniform. I looked up the device we use at work, which is made by an American company called PACE, P-A-C-E, and it looks like a vernier caliper. Anyone knows what a vernier caliper looks like? And you can set it, it's got 2 pins that you can put into the hole spacing. So you open it out, put the hole spacing, lock it, and it's got two parallels with V's cut out of it. You sit your resistor or your component in, fold the leads around, it's the right pitch to solder.
Yeah.
I thought, we've got loads of work, if they're good, I'll have one of them. £48. No, we won't have one of those. That was £6. It's not perfect because the thickness of this edge here, some components are too wide to fit in there, so it's not ideal, but it works for some things. And you simply pick your hole spacing on here, so if you've got a board, you can kind of pick the hole spacing, place your component in the groove, and then literally just bend it around and you'll get a uniform bend, which you can then fit into your circuit board. And this one I'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing is clinching or not to clinch. You familiar with the term clinching?
No.
No? When you actually put a component through the board, you can have the wires like that, or you can physically bend them out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can either bend them just a little, so it doesn't.
that's what I do. Stop them dropping
You
out.
can turn it over, you can then solder it so it doesn't fall out, or you can do what's called a full clinch where you bend it flat to the board. That gives you a game like this. It gives you a better mechanical joint, and it's less dependent, if you like, on the soldering in some regard. But the problem with that is when you come to replace it or do a repair, and some circuits, the circuit foil is very thin, and the land that you solder the component in. These aren't my work, by the way. These colleagues are prolific in making circuits. When you say about a land, you're talking about the pad that you'd actually solder to. So it's the little bit you'd solder. Now these are fairly well enormous compared to some of the things that we work on, which are maybe a fifth of that size. So you've just got a thin line to solder to. They will not tolerate any kind of abuse. You kind of get one shot at it. And if you bend the component afterwards, you just lift the track off the board. So you've got to decide when you fit the component whether you're going to clinch it or not, and whether in fact you need to. So with that, you just say try soldering that up without any additional flux. I say personally, I'm sort of since discovering liquid flux, I sort of use it everywhere and pretty well all the time. So again, use a heavier solder there. What we're doing when we're actually soldering, say obviously teaching the majority of people to suck eggs, you need to bring everything to a temperature where the solder flows. And I think one of the dangers I see when being doing training is people are afraid to get the board hot. So they kind of very quick, and you don't actually get the heat in there, and you don't get the solders to flow. It can be quite a relaxing, therapeutic thing. I quite enjoy soldering, although being nervous. But you watch it, and it'll actually flow, and you'll see it'll go nicely, and you get a nicely formed joint. If you're too quick, the heat's not there, it's not going to flow. And, yeah. Well, that's the classic one, isn't it? The round ball.
Instead of that, yes.
Two reasons for that. Too quick and too much solder. Again, the right size solder for the job.
I find it's better to use, if you can, quite a powerful line for a short time rather than a small line for a long time.
Yeah.
So that's just flows instantly.
Yeah. So that's quite. That's very kind of blobby. That's much more solder than it really needs. But pass that round. I've done myself like a test piece earlier through it. I was not having all these bits of variable instead. But one of the other things you find, and some equipment to work on, the capacitors that you used had very, very fine leads, which were lost in the hole. And I don't know about you, it's a kind of a habit that you've got to fill the hole. You don't.
It looks better, doesn't it?
Yeah, you don't have to fill the hole, and in that situation I would clinch the lead and make sure it's soldered parallel to the board, and it doesn't matter that the hole's not filled, but you kind of keep them going in and put a bit more solder in. You don't need to.
Do these boards come? Do they all come with full of holes?
Yeah, you can get on.
Those do, yeah.
Yeah.
You get what we call strip boards,
If they
strips of copper with 0.1 inch grid of holes in them. So you can, by putting breaches in and cutting the tracks, you can actually make up quite a complicated circuit quite easily. I use a lot of that because it's like prototyping stuff, but it works okay.
Can you just buy that one?
Yeah, in strips. Yeah.
What
Yeah,
about
there's a bit
what
of
about the board thing?
That's a bit of that.
Yeah. And what about the?
Yeah.
Big bits.
Oh, I see.
That's the portion of the big board. That's the piece that's been cut off the big board.
You can either in
I like
strips
your
that, and you can
fiberglass
break
pen
off what you
for
want, like a
cleaning.
biscuit.
Those are really, really good. They last for ages.
And Maplin's used to do one which had a smaller tip on it.
Yeah.
That's I've got.
I used to have one which was like a propelling pencil, so it had like a wick. You
That-
just wipe it
that's-
down.
We
Yeah.
don't we don't have them Maplins now.
No.
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 Where do you get such things nowadays?
The CPC,
Yeah.
maybe CPC
Don't know.
or RS.
Yeah.
Find out.
If you're using,
Oh yeah.
if you're using
CPC,
liquid flux, you don't need as much as
CPC
put on there.
are CPC are right next
Sorry,
to
Bill.
the.
Did you say that?
I'm just saying, if you're using
Just like the
liquid
Blackpool
flux,
turn.
you only need like a
You
dot.
can't see them as you go.
But that, the difference is with that, it leaves more.
It's a long way to
residue
go for
that needs
a
removing.
fiberglass
Yeah.
pen, isn't it?
You can buy them.
So is that fluxless solder you're using now?
No, that's flux solder.
Right, with liquid flux as well?
Yes, so the liquid flux is supporting it.
Yeah.
And what's happened there is that's the wire dropped when I did that. Where it's the wire's dropped when I put that in there, so it's not there's nothing through to actually solder, so I just poke that through a bit further.
Have you got asbestos fingers?
Sorry?
Have you got asbestos fingers?
Yeah.
You have to leave everything for about a minute now.
So what will happen there is you've got the residue, I don't know if that's actually soldered around properly, you've got the residue of the flux, so, which we don't want. In certain circumstances, I suppose transmitters, high voltage
Can I have a
stuff.
quick look at that?
Yeah, sure.
Cheers.
We tip it
Oh
over.
yeah. Little brown stain round that.
Yeah.
I should have run as usual.
See if that will. You can kind of inspect the damage. What's happened there, it's only flowed around part of the joint, so. Now, one of the bizarre things with the American standard, which we've been sort of working to as an accreditation, is that's pretty well an acceptable joint. It's not one that we would kind of, leave it like that. We would certainly rework it. But it's surprising. It only has to be something like 270 degrees. Calm down in a minute. And again, just give that a light kind of clean. One of the biggest things you find is actually cleaning off your joints. If you want to pass that round, that makes a real difference if you're doing any rework of what's.
Where do you get your IPA from, Bill?
Internet, I found that somewhere on eBay, I think it might be something like £12 for a litre. It's cheaper than radio spares.
What's that you're talking about?
IPA.
Isopropyl.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so that's a solvent.
Is that your liquid flux, is it?
No,
So where's the liquid flux?
that's liquid flux.
Ah, right.
That you can get, I think it's about £4, I'm not sure it's 125ml, but that I've only probably used about maybe 1 cc in about 2 years. You literally just need a dot.
So it stays in that hypodermic continuously, does it?
It does. There's a highly technical thing. I've got to claim it's going development, but when you get air dusters or the freezer sprays, they've got a little polythene tube.
Yeah.
Chop it off. Don't use the tip of your eye, but use the back of your eye and
Yeah.
melt
The
it.
end over.
Melt it so it's sealed, and then that keeps the tip free from drying out.
Yeah,
That's all that is.
there you
But that can last forever. The other flux, I nearly picked up a white marker earlier. It looks the same, it's in the same drawer. This is one, again, we use a similar thing at work, and I thought, well, can I give it a try? So see if we can find a...
That's
You always use lead-free soap?
I don't use lead-free.
No,
I've
not
not.
blame you, it's all.
Partly, I suppose I've got enough to last me till I'm in a nursing home, about 3 weeks I think. I've got loads of lead solder. We use lead solder at work. We did training with lead-free. You cannot get as nice, you can get an electrically sound joint, but you cannot really get a very nice looking joint out of lead-free. This, as I say, there's no colour to it, and that again, I'm not sure if you can see here. Drop things.
That'll be an acid, will it?
No, it's not. These ones are non-acid fluxes, and the one in here, the rosin in the solder and here is non-corrosive. Some of the early fluxes, I don't know if anyone remembers Fluxite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was a little lad, it used to be the copper soldering iron in the stove.
Yeah.
Heat it up, tin it.
I've got loads of it.
But it's pretty corrosive stuff, so when you solder it, you've got to clean it all of it around. If you're doing electronics, the last thing you want is anything at all corrosive going anywhere. So these ones are low residue, supposed to be no clean, so you're supposed to solder it and not leave any residue. All you can see, apart from it, you can have a little play actually, it just makes a wet mark.
How quickly does that dry out then?
Pretty instantly.
Pretty instantly, yeah.
We'll see how kind of well it performs.
So you're not relying on it being wet to use,
No.
it just it goes on and it's dried and it's ready to do the job.
The whole thing we were talking about earlier with, I suppose, oxidisation, has anyone ever made lead fishing weights or anything where you melt lead down and you get like a beautiful mercury finish, you scrape the dross off and it's beautiful mirror-like finish, but within seconds it's oxidised. And it's the same with any of the solder, that's oxidising all the time. So the flux is keeping the oxide, if you like, on the skin away from the actual joint from contaminating it. So that's one of the things, you want it to be active when you're soldering, and not to actually have disappeared and been burnt off.
So it's a protective barrier to stop the oxidisation.
Yeah, so it helps on the actual material you're working on, and actually the solder, as it melts and fuses to the actual, I say fuses, adheres to the board. Going back to preform tools, that was about £6. I was talking to a mate and saying about the paste tool, which is £48. He uses a much simpler tool, which I use subsequently. I was quite impressed. I thought, never thought of that.
Is this a flux, did you say?
It's a flux. So if you've got a piece of error board and you trimmed it, you've got 0.1 spacing. So if you want 0.6 or whatever, you can stick your component in, bend it over the edge, and you then formed it to the correct pitch with an odd bit of error board.
Mine is a piece of plastic shaped a bit like that, and it came free with either practical wireless or practical electronics. Quite a long time ago.
About 1980s, I think, right?
Yeah. I think I was only just licensed then.
Right. Yeah.
Soldering irons, Brian, what do you recommend?
Bill.
Sorry.
So,
I used to use what do you call this? Weller, until it broke down, and I bought one from Maplin, and quite honestly, it's not very good at all.
I've only
I've seen some nice ones for sale there.
Yeah, apart from that one I got from the auction, and then found it with the bits, there was tips with it as well.
Yeah.
That's quite an enormous tip in that one. I'm not sure what that one goes up to temperature-wise. This one is a 25 watt Antex. I did have a 15 watt Antex for ages when I started doing more sort of integrated circuits and things. So I got really frustrated with it because you couldn't really get the heat into the joint, and I found you're dwelling a long time.
Yeah.
So actually get there's something
Well, like about the Weller, it was like 48 watts or something.
The Weller's a very good iron. It's the sort of thing, I've done a job to buy one, but that was one of the tips we used, the fine tip. The thing to bear in mind with the tip size, and if you like the tip mass, you've got something called thermal inertia. So it's a bit like the big old copper soldering irons. It took a fair bit to cool them down.
Yeah.
When you're soldering a joint, this may not sound like much, but it's a heat sink. So it's drawing heat away from your iron and your solder. And if you get too small an iron, you put it on there, it almost sticks because it hasn't got the heat to actually keep the solder molten. So it's important that you actually gain the right size tip for the job. The other thing is with printed circuit boards, they're not all the same weight of copper. Some, if they're using power circuits and high power switching, they can use a much heavier level of copper foil on them compared to normally electronic. And consequently, it'll pull the heat from your iron. It's a fairly quick test. As soon as you put your iron on there and it doesn't move, you realise you either need to up the temperature of your iron, put a larger bit in so it just holds that heat for that bit longer. One of the things, the ones we have at work are all singing and all dancing, but you actually have a look-up table and it'll give you a tip correction figure. So if you wanted 370 degrees at the tip, you might have to set it to say 390 to get the tip at 370, and it actually accounts for that. Most of us don't have that luxury. That one I checked at work and it's actually 400 degrees, the tip, which is hotter than I thought it would be, 400. Most of the time I'm using the soldering stations at work. I work typically 370, 385, so quite a bit cooler than that. So it's the only difference it makes is the time that you dwell when you're soldering the joint. And I think as Dave rightly said, there's a preference I think to use a hot iron and do the joint, if you like, really quickly than to have a cool iron, because one of the things you'll find if you have the heat there too long, it delaminates the copper. There's an adhesive bond. And sometimes one of the things I do, I actually want to remove a piece of track for repair. I can cut it with a scalpel, and I'll show you that in a minute. You can heat it, and you can just remove it with the iron. So, for example, I'm going to come back to it in a second, but if I want to remove that track, I can literally cut through the actual foil, hopefully. Try that flux on there. Top back on that. I don't really need much solder on there, so it's literally just to heat that, and I actually want to heat it till it breaks the bond in the actual foil. And of course this one won't do it because we're doing a demonstration. It should, given time. It shows you at one point that how robust these circuits are. That you don't kind of have to be fearful of it falling apart. I mean, despite that being 400, that's still not giving that quite a push, and it's still not lifting.
Maybe just a little blob of solder up, maybe.
Yeah.
Just to spread the heat onto the iPhone at some time.
Yeah, that should. That should.
Just needs a little bit of help to
Yeah.
spread the heat a bit.
Of course, that's how the I think where it's been heated, that's actually oxidised the copper. So that's not actually taking the
It's very effective in cleaning that, isn't it?
I think that's one of the most useful tools, because what you can do with these
It's
as well.
fiberglass, you say?
It's fiberglass. You can trim the outer back,
Yeah.
so it's softer and less aggressive than that. The only thing you do need to watch out, it is fiberglass, so you either get bits, you don't want to get it big in or rubbing your eyes and getting it in your eyes. Certainly not recommended for that. So. That's typically not going to play ball.
It's because we're all watching.
It is, isn't it? Moving on. That normally would just come away. When you're
You've got a quality piece of board there, haven't you?
yeah, when you're placing components, there's a genuine kind of practical side to this. In terms of if you're clinching or whatever, if we put a slight pinch on it so it doesn't fall out. It's assuming that you actually get it to stay in place to start with. When you're cutting stuff, cut down, yeah. And it helps if you have like a little scrap bin down there. Don't cut up. One of the things, this is tin copper wire, so it's fairly soft. But some of the components you'll find, and quite often capacitors, it's steel, copper plating, then tin. And some integrated circuit leads, you find if they're a round leaded component, they're quite often a steel pin that's copper plated and tin. If you cut those that way up, they ping off a good one, and I managed to get one in my eye. Try using the no eye bath, so you just got the litre bottle of saline wash to try and wash something out of your eye. So just throwing water in it.
Yeah.
But if you don't
So
wear-
you cut those
if you don't
off
wear
before you
glasses-
solder. I always
Right.
leave them long and solder and then cut.
This is what I'm going to come to.
Right.
Say if you don't wear glasses or good coverage, I do recommend get a cheap pair of safety specs. Yes, if you're soldering that, this is quite a long clinch. I'd probably keep them shorter than that. Give this one a go again. It's funny, typical when you say trying to do demonstrations.
Got your long legs sticking up like this.
Yeah. These things, say normally when the solder variable is one of my things I hate. I don't want it for kind of bodge development. I don't like it for. See, that's not flowing. That's left to kind of hold that side. This is the thing. What you tend to do is then just put more and more solder until you get a board that covers it, which you can do, or you can apply, as I say, a flux and reflow the joint and see if it'll go. That's gone round. Looks like it has. Now that's kind of as soldering goes, making a joint, that's perfectly kind of okay. But what often happens, depending on your board, and that's okay, but you'd say cut them back. The danger is there depending on the actual components, so especially with steel legs, is you can then get oxidisation forms and it actually goes down. And I had a nightmare of a problem on a particular piece of equipment where it had corrosion down the IC legs. It was a beast of an IC, ceramic chip, and it had to go in a temperature cycling chamber. So it was being heated, frozen, and the joints kept failing. And they looked perfect under a microscope, perfectly soldered, all flux cleaning put in there. And it wasn't until I took the IC out again and examined it that you could see pitting all down the legs of the actual component lead, and you weren't getting a thorough adhesion of the solder to the actual joint, which is through plated joint. So there's the solder all the way through the board. But with that, really, what you can do is simply do a reflow, so the ends of the copper, which are now exposed, are then covered over. Yeah, so again, whether you use this type of pen flux or the other flux, the thing is, say you don't want to end up with just a mound of solder, and you can get away with cutting and doing one first and then doing the other, and just watching for it to flow. And that's why I typically didn't want to flow again. And give it time to flow. And you're capping the bare ends of the copper with solder, so you're not going to get oxidisation. Bearing in mind some of the stuff can be in service 30, 40 years. It's got a long time to go wrong. A lot of modern stuff, it's throwaway, so it's never going to get to that point where it corrodes. So it's a problem. But it's something to bear in mind when you're trimming or soldering. It's better if you can to actually cap it. If you're connecting, if you're doing switches and leads and things, don't know how many people like myself have struggled where you're trying to hold something that's still and you're trying to put a wire onto it and you're kind of I mean, that's quite... And again, I would always tin the components going onto it, so I'd tin that as well. Make sure that that's tinned. And yes, the wire does get hot. And bring the two together. If it's in a reasonably timely fashion, you can get away without adding additional solder. But I'm not particularly keen on that, and I can see that's not a fantastic joint. If I pass that around, you can kind of, you'll see it's slightly powdery. It's very hard not to move and to keep it absolutely still. So one of the things that's important is to produce a mechanical joint rather than just hold it and solder it. So anywhere where you've got a hole like that where you can put the wire through and clinch it over, so it's self-supporting, flux it and then solder it, or make sure the things are clean.
I think you've got to do that sometimes. When you've got multiple conductors coming into one
Yes.
to one hole, you've got to bend. You've got to really capture them before you do it. That's
Yeah, actually. Another point with that, that's actually gold-plated, and you find some of the expensive connectors are gold-plated. And one of the things was new to me really from this course was when you have gold-plated connectors, you need to remove the gold. Now, I don't mean to scrape it off. The gold will dissolve in the solder and will contaminate the joint. And it's as simple as you solder the cup or the joint and then draw the solder off, either using solder wick or a solder sucker. You're familiar with solder suckers, solder wick? Yeah.
I think I've heard of them, but I don't know what they are.
It's a sprung-loaded bicycle pump. It has a piston inside.
Right?
It has effectively a trigger.
Go on, something
So it's sprung-loaded, so it's like a back-to-front syringe. So when you press the button,
it stops.
so it sucks. So while the solder's molten, you can bring it in close contact. I've had better ones. The thing, if you buy one of these, this one's falling apart, I've had it for years, is the finer tip you can get, the better. Because that was brand new, I've hardly used it. And
It's too big, isn't it?
It's a very wide diameter tip. It's got a really bit of flonk to it, but it's, if I block the end, it's, you say, it's actually you can't get it into the work, it's a bit too clumsy.
It's like a big job, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it won't take all the solder out of the joint, just the surplus.
It
Well,
can
take
take-
it all out.
if you get a good one,
Nearly all.
it will, like for those, this joint here, if I can heat that. If you can, this one, as I say, it's a bit warm, you can kind of stick it over the component wire and let it go. And if you get it right, it will clear the joint of solder. So
It's very satisfying when you do that, isn't it?
so if that's,
And you look and it's all gone.
Especially if the component comes straight out. It's great.
yeah.
You have to do this.
So if that's, the other thing is, say, these aren't our tables in that sense, there's bits of solder bits everywhere, because depending where you're doing it, like the kitchen table or whatever, it's handy to put something down so the wife doesn't kill you.
On the lounge carpentry.
Yeah, so that should,
You know the best way to remove solder from a carpet? Get your side cutters and just go
Leave me another way.
yeah, so that's actually removed that now, so I can just pull that out, so let's remove the solder. It's very useful in a lot of things if you're replacing components, to get in there to actually remove the solder. The other thing we use quite a lot of work is solder wick. Now that is just copper braid. It does have a powder flux in it, but I've never found, even from brand new, that the powder flux is very good.
I don't think they're very effective there.
Well,
It's like dabbing water with a cloth, is it? So
It
it
is,
soaks it up, that's
It's
it.
It's a
literally-
capillary attraction, isn't it?
it's literally, as you say, it's a wick. So if we put some solder on there, just so the camera will pick this up if we give ourselves. So this is thinking, you see the flux actually makes a wet area around the joint, so the flux kind of disperses. My pet hate with this, and it drives me nuts because it's expensive, and I'll see pieces around and there's a blob at every inch or two. I think, why?
Why?
It's expensive. Why are you doing that? Because one of the things is, if you leave it with the end wetted and sort of tinned, it's already started, because you have to heat it, you have to get everything to the same temperature before the solder flows and it will wick. So the solder, if it's already wetted, is a good start. That's what we want to do. But typically, this is probably going to make me out to lie again, and it is working a bit, but it's kind of not that impressive. But what I do find is, I've never tried it without actually, is the magic liquid flux. Literally just put a dribble of that on there and do the same again, put some more solder on top of that. And in the right place. And you should find is it will work somewhat. You can see it's come back about a centimetre, 3/8 of an inch. So although it hasn't taken it all back, what you can see, it's come back about far now.
Quite a lot more.
You've still got a lot of solder on the job, haven't you?
Yeah, but I suppose the point I'm trying to make is with the, if I clean the flux off, you can see hopefully quite clearly
Yeah.
that that's how far it'll wick applying the liquid flux. And that's quite loaded.
Yeah.
It's quite, it's really pulled it in. It's not taking it all off, admittedly, but you would simply just keep moving on until you remove all the solder that you've got. So if we put that back in there now without there's going to be a residue of the liquid flux in there, but we give it a reasonable length of time.
Yeah, you kept on going at it, it would eventually...
Yeah, what you'll see there is, compared to like an A and a B, I don't know if you can, what's the best way to display that, but it's probably about a third.
Yeah.
So you can see that there. So the liquid flux makes that a lot better. Useful thing with this again is, because it's a wick and it holds solder, you can use it for other things other than just removing solder. Because in a lot of circuit boards, this one hasn't got any tinning other than where the things are soldered. I might decide that I want all of this tin before I populate it with components. Now you can buy tinning salts and things that will do that, or you can use solder wick and solder, and it works normally quite well. So if you want to have like a professional looking board that's vetted out, I might have to turn that around a bit there. Typically I'll obviously turn some more onto that, but it should serve the purpose. What you should be able to do then is, rather than getting big blobs, say this, you can then move it around, say that's,
A thin layer.
and get a really fine layer of solder. So you can actually tin your board or tracks using solder wick.
Very good tip, man.
What else have we thought of? Component removal, again, your two choices really is like a desoldering pump or solder wick. I tend to prefer using the solder pump, and at work we've got, let's say Bill's got the Weller pump, which has a continuous pump and a hollow bit, so you can stick it in there and it just keeps pulling.
It's quick, isn't it?
They're quick, and I'm not that fortunate to have one, but similarly you need to apply a bit of solder, not too much. You pick a joint and it is literally letting it pull the solder out. From practice I found that it gets kind of mostly, if they're plated through holes, it never kind of gets it all out. So I find that typically, I'll go that resistor actually, it tends to be more effective using the desoldering pump, that you get the joint wet and then you just heave it through.
I feel like taking my hat off to anybody who
gets a good result with one of those.
Yeah.
Having used a continuous pumping one, because they bring problems of their own, and that, particularly with through-plated holes.
Yeah.
I found that you've got to have, especially if you're worried about overheating the component, it really matters having the right size of the bore and the bit. And then you've got to work it round and round, and then hope you can pick off the last whoosh.
That's the preferred technique with those with a hollow bit, is when you actually heat it, you don't just draw, you waggle it, so you're pulling the component away from the actual hole, because if it's put through plated, the solder kind of drips all the way down, and if it's a thick board, it can really hang in there. So you usually say, and I found sometimes you have to do that multiple operations before you can actually clear the component.
How much does one of those things cost?
These are about
quid.
How much?
Few quid,
Yeah.
maybe.
£3 or £4, little thing about it.
It's, there are some kind of really expensive ones. We've got some ginormous things which don't have a recoil, but they're so cumbersome you can't really use them. But unfortunately, me and my wife used to have this argument about you get what you pay for, but we've settled on you don't always get what you pay for. You can spend a lot of money for tax.
You can get caught.
Unfortunately, things like Pace, the American stuff, is a good product, but at the same time, it's blooming expensive, and 50 quid for something you use a number of times isn't a bargain. When you say with this tip, this one's fairly clean, good condition, but the other thing to bear in mind is contact area, because obviously the greater the contact area, the faster the heat transfer. Because this has got solder resist, which is the shiny green layer that stops the solder running all around the tracks. There's no point if I just put the very edge of the iron in to try and desolder it, I'm not going to get any heat into it. So I'm presenting the side of the iron to the actual component lead and the edge of the iron to the actual PCB land, so I can get the maximum heat in. And again, if there's no solder on there, you're not going to get any conduction or heat. And with these, sometimes it helps to kind of overfill the actual joint, because what you want to do is to get the heat in to try and pull the component off as quick as possible.
Where does the solder go up that nozzle though? How?
Right, that's actually...
You get a
Into
little,
the body.
you get a
You have
little
to
rock
unscrew
in
the
your
end.
solder in there, and
Or,
when you push the plunger back down, it pushes it
There's
out
a-
the end.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
if I push that down,
Ejector-like.
there's a pin,
Yeah, got it.
and when that
Little slug of solder
when
pops
it
out.
clogs up, this is getting lots of bits and pieces, but you eventually get a big plug. And what happens with this particular one, when you get a big plug, it pushes the end off the end comes off.
All right.
That one it doesn't. But this has got the same thing. You can't really see at that point, but it's got a pin at the end which will.
I know this sounds, you must
Or not.
accept I'm not very good at these things. This solder that you've got in the reels,
Yes. So it's got a pin, so that will push the
yeah,
solder through.
eject what you've just said.
Yeah.
Back to solder.
Yeah.
For instance,
Yeah.
take plumbing solder.
Yep.
Any good?
Same stuff.
And
This is all
Bit
called
big.
60-40, so 60% tin, 40% lead. Gives it a better fluidity when it's heated. Plumbing solder is generally the same. The thing is with plumbing solder, it's normally about 5 times the thickness of that, and it's not always flux cored. So you can use it, and you could use it with either of these, fluxes to aid the flow. But you're back to the problem of horses for courses, that if you have too much solder, you're just going to get a mound, and it's going to be frustrating. If anything, you're better, say, going for the thin stuff and using enough to sort of load the joint than having too thick of material and ending up being frustrated because you get a blob. You can, as I say, if you do get those round blobs, you can either use the solder sucker to remove it completely and start again, or you can use solder wick and just remove, some. One of the cheats we do at work with these solder suckers, the paste ones, so it's a hollow solder iron tip, is when you've actually used it, the tip's empty, so it's a hollow core, so you get capillary action. So sometimes when you get a solder joint that's a bit overloaded, you literally just touch the desoldering tool on top. You don't push the button, and capillary action just takes off a measure of the solder. You end up with a perfect joint. So there's some dodges to reflow work. That's pretty well, I think, desolder that so you can remove it. This has got a bit of a clinch, you can see like the joggle in the legs, so that kind of holds it in, so you can stick it back in. One of the things you can see actually on here, if I pass that around, what's happened there, what we're trying to do on the other one is to get the PCB material to lift. This one has lifted. So if I pass that around, you'll see so it's magnified there somewhere. So it's the right hand one there, so that's...
With these circuits here,
Yeah,
take that one.
yeah.
That, you know, looks like, Well, what actually, can you, anybody, or tell me what that actually does? What does that actually do as a unit?
I don't know that one specifically, there's a colleague at work who...
But could you,
made that.
but what I'm getting at, can you read this?
No,
No?
not as you're suggesting, I think, Barry.
By looking at it,
Because you don't know, by just looking at what
you know what
these
the chip
components actually are.
tables, because of the number.
Yeah.
But as a circuit, it's
You can't think, you couldn't like pick that and say, right, that is whatever it is.
yeah, in some circuits you can.
Yeah,
You can tell whether it's an oscillator or an amplifier or something like
Yeah.
that. But the finer details, no, you have to.
you've got to work to a circuit diagram
Yeah.
to obtain what you're trying to achieve.
There's certain
You can't go the other way
There's certain
backwards.
circuits that do certain things,
Oh, right.
and certain chips that do things.
Yeah.
It's not got a chip on it there, the black thing.
Oh, well, it's no use
Got
actually.
Several.
Seven.
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever had to remove
Something like
integrated
something like
circuits?
that, for instance,
Yeah.
will have a number on it.
Say that again, Bill.
You look in
Removing
tables, you
integrated
find out
circuits?
No.
what it does.
You can go along try and either use solder rec or whatever and desolder, and it depends ultimately on whether you know the chip is defective and you're going to refit it, or whether the chip can be scrapped. And again, it depends on the circuit board, on how frail the design of the board is. If you've any doubts and that you can replace the chip, your safest bet is to actually go along and to cut the legs and then simply remove them one at a time. That's by far the safest way, because what can happen if you haven't got them all desoldered and you start prying it out with a screwdriver is you end up, if it's a through hole board, I don't know if any of you have come across the ones where it's literally like a spiral of copper in the actual hole of the board that joins the top and bottom, and sometimes you pull it out and that comes out as well. There are, I don't know if you come across things, funnelets, eyelets. Anyone? No?
No.
It's a copper tube that's tin. It looks a bit like a either like a funnel, hence the name funnelet, or
An eyelet.
an eyelet. And they come in various sizes, from very small to larger. If it's a plated through hole and you happen to destroy it, you can literally ream the hole out to the next size, drop one of these little things in, and the top, as I say, is like a top hat. So, as I say, there's two types. One is literally kind of looks a bit like a screw, but they're hollow, and the other's almost identical, but apart from the top is flat. And you literally put it through your circuit board. So if that's the circuit board, you then have a crude flaring tool, which is just, you have a tool either side, so you have a tool with a point there. This one has a point. You keep it in the board with that and press that, and you mechanically flare that out. This is the same thing, but the top is already flat, and you then insert a flaring tool which pushes that out, and you get a mechanical joint that you can then refit your component and then flow solder around to wet both sides. I've never actually looked for those on the internet. I've never really had any need for those at home. I've only ever had one or two. I tend to sneak into work and do them there where I've got all the gear. The kits were really expensive, and it used to frustrate me that you'd run out of the particular size you use all the time, and you've got 200 of the other size you never use, and I'm sure there's people in other sections who've run out of your size. And one of the things I wanted to touch on was surface mount. This is kind of the latest project. This is something that does work, so try not to look too heavily. But there's 3 surface mount transistors on here, as well as 2 surface mount preset.
You show us the camera, Mark?
Well, there's the best lighting for that, is that?
Good. We point to them, the surface mount components.
So you've got ordinary sort of transistors here, LEDs, obviously an IC. 2 surface mount preset pots. Surface mount means they're soldered on the same side of the board as the copper. And then we've got 3 surface mount transistors. And that has all been built using 25 volt iron. I'll pass that round so you can have a look. You might want to look through the glass. And the
Is
other
that when
thing,
your hand was a bit steadier, Bill?
yeah, when I wasn't so nervous, I'm slowly sort of calming down here. This board was designed for run off 3 9-volt batteries, which is expensive and I didn't really want to do. And I had a 30 volt power supply module, 15 supply. So obviously on the 2 outer rails you've got 30 volts. But the guy who designed the circuit, this is something I've copied off the internet, said 30 is too high, so really you need 27. So this is series regulator. So that we put something called an emitter follower, so it just drops the voltage. I lose 3 volts basically off my supply, supply the board with what I want. And that is little pieces of copper board, just cut off with a junior hacksaw into squares, super glued onto the board. So you've then got an island to solder to. And before I'd sawn the edge of the board off, I thought I'll leave that on there for now. And I was rather glad I did.
Yes.
So I'll pass that round and have a look. There's 3 surface mount.
What was I supposed to look at that one? I missed that.
That was
You could see where Bill
the
had
pads
taken.
where I desoldered this.
Oh, I see.
that
You take the
resistor.
components out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I've taken it out, you'll see
But
there's a bit
the
flapping
board
in the
is lifted.
breeze. It's
Oh,
pushed-
yeah, got,
the
yeah,
track
push the
yeah,
top off. This was just a scrap board. There's a number of surface mount components in there. I kind of saved them. That's not part of that actually. There's a transistor and 2 capacitors there. This will be interesting with shaky hands, but what you can see on there, where things have been removed, there's flux residue. So you wouldn't be out of your mind to try and solder things into a dirty board. So the first thing you need to do is to remove flux residue. Out of interest, when you clean the top side of the board, some of the components are very fine leads up on that board there, and you don't want to be using a stiff brush when you've got fine components that are going to bend in the wind. So it makes sense to have a softer brush that you can clean around and in between.
It's still fiberglass, is it?
These are just ordinary like paint brushes.
Oh, are they? Right, yeah.
So they're perfectly, any cheap sort of craft brush will do for that. These were both the same, and it's literally a pair of scissors and giving it a trim. So it gives it a bit more stiff, so you can see it clean.
Haircut.
So where you've actually had rework or things done there, your flux residue, then the isopropyl alcohol should remove all of that. So it should bring it back to completely clean.
Don't you have valves anymore?
Yeah, we have valves.
Turn the water on and off with a
I think
bag.
it's a bit bigger. Yes. Blimey.
A bit more than that there, so. If you're doing surface mount, one of the things you do need to do is to have very little solder on the pads. So this is where the transistor was fitted, just in this space here. But there are little pools of solder, not much. I'll pass it around, you can have a look. So it's just this area here. So if we're going to fit a surface mount device back in there, we need
Oh, I see.
we need it to be tinned, but we need minimal solder on there because the devices are small, and in comparison to the device, they'll end up with one end up in the air. And we want the devices to sit flat. One word of caution with some surface mount devices like trimming capacitors and some potentiometers is checking that they're suitable for flux soldering, because some of them, the flux will go into it and your capacitor then won't turn, and it can be a job to get the residue out, and you find it doesn't work afterwards. It's a fairly
Really
poor,
look like components, do they?
poor choice of pots on that, because the I think it's the 500 ohm ones are lighter to solder, because the actual legs are actually under the device. There's nothing actually sticking out to get your iron on.
I can't get my mind how they can build something within that tiny little space that
Yeah.
does anything really.
Years ago, didn't you put wax on boards and then put them in acid baths? Does that sound right?
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
See?
for etching.
Do you do that anymore?
Some people might.
I wouldn't know.
Some people might.
I don't know, I can see as though I can remember they did wax on the board and
Well,
then
yeah, there's
Oh, they're not
actually,
too big, are they?
actually resist paint. You
possibly.
drop it into ferric chloride, and it etches the copper away, and you wash it.
And then you've got that's a circuit.
People still do that.
Yeah.
I did one
more.
about,
Yeah.
with one about 12 months ago.
You wouldn't do something that was very, very fine with something like that, would you? Would you?
That's been done with ferric chloride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just can't get my mind around those surface mount components.
Reclaiming the copper from ferric chloride.
Can you show me one of those to the camera, those surface mount components?
Yeah. We need something as a backing to. So one of the vital things you need when you're working with surface mounts, hold them steady hands, which I certainly haven't got tonight, is a pair of eyesight. Yeah, so we've got,
What are they? Transistors?
No, those are...
yeah, so these are chip capacitors, these two.
I'm just seeing how
Those can be fitted up either way. The ends are tinned, and this is a transistor, so that's the underside. It goes that way up.
You need to be careful, that car might swap that.
Something for size.
Yeah. Do we keep that?
Don't
Tips.
spread it all.
I mean, if you think about the physical attributes of that, first of all, there's a cover, a protective layer, which has got a certain thickness, hasn't it, all the way around.
Yeah.
Then you've got a terminal going through, which must have an in and an outside. So to then deal with what goes on inside,
Yeah.
it's beyond belief, really, that they create anything that works. I don't know how they do
So
it.
that will
It must all be done with a microscope, mustn't it?
a lot of these things you do actually work under a microscope.
Yeah.
One of the jobs I used to do was something called a log amp, part of a piece of radar kit, and for 6 weeks I was doing repairs under a microscope, and the novelty wore off, I can tell you.
I couldn't believe that.
It's, as I say, with all things really, the important thing to get any kind of reliable joint is simply clean it. That's the
But you wouldn't have, if you were doing a circuit, you wouldn't necessarily, you could have something bigger than that that
Oh,
would
yeah.
do the same job.
yeah.
That's for micro circuits,
Yes.
presumably.
Yeah.
Maybe you can get them, because some of the bigger components have gone out of production now. They might very well be new old stock that's available online.
Blimey, so we're all getting close to this.
We're being pushed down this line, aren't we?
I think I'm going to have trouble with this job, aren't I? All I'm used to is wiping joints of lead
Yeah.
with a handful of
And a moleskin.
Moleskin.
Russian tallow. Slightly different.
What's surprising, I think, when I first started, I suppose as a kid playing with electronics, there was so much about heat damaging transistors, and I think a lot of them are germanium. So you'd either have tweezers and you'd have a little sleeve over it so it would hold the ends together.
Act as a
And
heat sink.
you'd literally clip the other side of the joint before you soldered it to stop the heat going up. And what baffles me with a lot of the semiconductors, these transistors, like on a log amp, you could remove them by burying them in solder, flick them off the board, clean the solder off, and refit them. Quite a difference.
They're rugged.
Yeah, very rugged.
Yeah,
So we find a patch where that lived. Find its home, which is round here. So that actually lives. There's 3 contact pads there, and then like a collector or heatsink kind of pad there. So if you were to solder that, again, it's mechanically placing it to where it needs to go. And sometimes just like a cocktail stick can be quite handy in keeping it in place. And it's picking, if you like, a lead to solder to tack it in place. It means if it's not quite where you want it to be, you've got a bit of chance to move it. The problem here with liquid flux is they do dry out quite quick because of the alcohol base, and they become sticky. So there's nothing more annoying than you kind of hold it with a stick, tack it, and then you move it and you pull the device away with it.
Do you not need 3 hands here?
Sometimes that's handy, and again you can see that just moved just touching it. But we've got the flux on the pad and on the component, so we just stick it back into place and move it till we get it where we want it, or not.
Don't you just use paste and a heat gun or something?
You can use solder paste and a heat gun, depending on the board. We used to use a process which was all surface mount, and you actually put the board on a hot plate and you heated it from the bottom, and then the paste melted and the components kind of found. Some components they'll literally pull themselves into position as the solder melts, and it's the what's the word, like a meniscus effect, and it'll grab either end, and you just, as you heat it, you'll see a capacitor that's sat crooked, suddenly doink, and it pulls into place. So for something like that, you really want to use finer kind of solder wire. So we're going to try and stick one end. So I'll try and stick my mitt on it and not get in there. And literally just touch that in there.
What's that component called you doing?
That's a transistor.
Surface mount transistor.
Surface mount SMD.
Surface mount transistor.
Do they have Felix transistors?
Yeah, usually.
Yeah. Sometimes they'll, like this has got effectively where the collector is, they'll use a connector there so it acts to draw heat away. Because most of the devices, the main substrate is like the collector. So you see a lot of the old TO3 transistors, and the case is always like the collector, and that's clamped to the heatsink with a minor washer or whatever. So we've soldered one lead down, so now it's not going to go anywhere. So we can then follow on and solder, hopefully, the other lead. So we don't want a lot of solder, we just want, and these don't take a lot of time. And here I'm having to turn the iron sideways because the tip is wider. And we don't want to put heaps of solder on, we just want kind of enough. And similarly with this, we just want a little bit to get in there, and then it should feed in from the edge like that, and that's it. So again, clean it off with all the isopropyl that's all over the table. When I was doing that circuit board there, I've had fun because, as I say, I couldn't get it under the microscope. My microscope I can get in about an inch or two, and it's only about 20 times magnification, which is roughly all you need. But I could see like there, and I could see there, but I couldn't see there. So I literally just had to tack it and then use a hand magnifying glass and see if it's in place, do the others. So you're almost doing it by feel. If you want to pass that round. Quick look at me that way, so it doesn't look too much of a mess. So that should be stuck in there. With the chip capacitors, there's a technique where you can literally melt the solder, use tweezers or whatever, and slide the component from one end onto the melted solder. Or similarly, you can actually pin it down with a cocktail stick and tack one end and then solder the other.
Can you just have a look at one of those in my hand?
Yeah, sure. one of the things with surface mount assembling things is when you're building things yourself, you always want it to look nice and
You
neat
put that on.
and almost like production made. But the truth is, when you look at a lot of the manufacturer stuff, the components are quite often quite gauzy because they're computer placed and soldered, and they don't always put into place and look nice and neat.
How have you managed, how have you done this bit though? How, where the copper's been removed? Have you done?
That's just an etching process. A friend of mine has got software called Proteus, so you can design a schematic, and then from that schematic it will transfer it to a printed circuit board pattern, and you can then print that with a laser copier onto semi-gloss paper. So you've then got a black image on your paper. You then literally tape it to a board that you've cleaned thoroughly with a brush and alcohol, and then you feed it through an ordinary laminator about a dozen times, and then the paper and the toner is bonded to the copper. You then soak it in warm, soapy water forever, and keep rubbing it, and then all the paper comes away, and you're left with a toner deposited on the copper. You can then transfer that to ferric chloride, as Dave was saying earlier, and that will remove all the unwanted or unprotected copper, and you're left then with the etched board. And you then have to go ahead and drill out all the holes, which took me ages. You then have pin
It's
vise.
a long-winded process, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if you use those boards with multiple holes all over the place,
Yeah.
then presumably you make the circuit with mechanical wires between them rather than using those that can
What
go.
we've had, we use a
You've got the
series of
track.
strips, so in one direction, they're all connected together.
Yeah.
That's
So if you've got something on that strip that connects to that one, something that connects that strip to that one, you can just
Just
join.
with it mechanically bond wiring.
You've sold
If
to
I'm
me
doing
that
a
you've
circuit
got
board,
Let's
a
say,
whole strip
because that
of
looks a
Yeah.
fairly complicated bit of kit. Yeah.
I actually
I see, yeah.
Nicole's
I've got it.
nail
Bloody
varnish.
hell, yeah.
oh right. Yeah, it's a good.
Painted.
Yeah.
Use that as a resist.
Well, I'm looking at
You
it.
can actually get
Say again.
you can get etch resist pens, just like a felt tip.
I've used ordinary.
They're not-
I've used ordinary felt tips,
Yeah.
and they've worked.
Right.
Was it a transistor?
Yeah, I've used the etch resist pens, but typically you're trying to do something fairly fine, and just as you get to a critical point, it goes blob.
Yes.
And to wipe it off, you can't take everything else off with it. The toner method's very good, very kind of reliable. You can do quite fine traces if you're American, tracks if you're English.
I've seen people use irons, just a clothes iron as well.
Sorry, was that?
So if you don't have a laminator, I've seen people use a clothes iron to transfer the toner to the.
Yeah, I don't.
It's just.
It's. I think part of it with the laminators, you've got the physical pressure of the rollers, because the laminators obviously are quite, the rollers are quite close together, and they sort of, the pouches are heat adhesive, isn't it? So as it passes through the rollers, it actually closes the pouch and adheres to whatever's inside of it. With that laminating process, I said I ran it through about a dozen times. So I'd rather run it through 6 times too many and let it work first time than run it through 5 times and the thing come away and it's not actually transferred the image. But that kind of worked first time. The only problem is I used glossy photo paper instead of the mate recommended semi-matte. And where the design is, where there's a hole to be drilled for the conventional through-hole components, you have a little dot where it can etch through, so it helps to centre the drill when you're drilling. And because I've used this other material, it doesn't come out very small holes. So I'd use a brush like that to clean in between the tracks and make sure all the stuff was removed for etching. But it didn't work brilliantly where the things are. So if you look on this actual integrated circuit, I think it's that pin there, it kind of went off a bit. So it's a bit frustrating.
I noticed that, Bill.
Yeah. So I knew someone would.
I'm not trying to be awkward, but
Yeah.
that transistor looked enormous compared to those
Yeah.
resistors. Can you do one of those? Because I can't believe you can actually solder one of those to a board without.
I won't on that one because I say that's actually a working project. But that's, let's say that's one there, so we can perhaps try and remove that and refit it. There's a lot of devices now which are microprocessor controlled for testing components, and most times, say with a transistor, you use a diode checker on a meter, and you check, your two diode connections inside the board. And we have quite a lot of fancy things with 3 leads. You plug it on there, it'll tell you what the device is, it'll tell you what lead is which, and it's a lot quicker because you not only know that you've got 2 diode junctions, you know it's an N-channel MOSFET enhancement mode doodah.
PQC.
There's one chapter 2. The requirement of pinched over cups or something. I'm trying to get rid of that.
So if you're removing a component, one of the things there, this has got quite a minimal level of solder on it. And if there's a very small amount of solder, it's hard to get it fluid enough for the solder pump to work. So you're doing what you would least like to see as a solder joint, which is your good old blob. And once you've got your good old blob, you can get the heat into it to keep it, as well as the thermal mass. The bigger the blob, not the better the job, it stays fluid for longer. It's got to, because there's greater thermal mass. So loading it with solder helps you to actually desolder it. And again, we can't get that right over, so we're just going to work from the side. And let's see if we can. That's actually got all 3 legs. We've got 1. In that situation, literally the ones that haven't desoldered, rather than keep yanking them around, you can actually, obviously, if you get it close enough, you can just heat it and pull it.
That looks, we've got something out then, all right.
It's 2, so it might even fall out on this one. Well, it's better if you put the pump up than actually. That's been clinched. That's what's making it. So you can see there that you can see that the leads have been formed.
Yeah, yeah.
So it actually holds itself in place.